26-year-old Kenzie Hauk found dead in her rural Pennsylvania farmhouse.
Absolutely. Jordan Brown, the boy that a court said shot and killed his father's pregnant fiancee.
Civil case against 4 former state troopers. He'd sued them after being charged with murder.
It's been awful to have to relive this. I'm very pleased with the outcome.
Everywhere, he was dubbed the world's youngest monster.
Kenzie Hauk was 26 years old, pregnant, and a few weeks away from everything she had ever wanted. She had 2 little girls at home, a man she loved, and a baby boy on the way. By every account, her life finally felt right. Then one cold February morning, a crew of tree trimmers pulled up to her house and found her 4-year-old standing in the doorway, sobbing. Paramedics arrived and treated it as a pregnancy complication. They moved through the house freely, touched the doorknobs, walked the hallways. It was not until the coroner knelt beside her that everything stopped. 4 words cut through the room. "We have a problem." A gunshot wound, hidden, and by that point, the scene was already gone. No confirmed weapon was ever found. No one was ever convicted as an adult. But an 11-year-old boy, one who called Kenzie his mom, and had been counting down the days until his baby brother arrived, was handcuffed, charged with first-degree murder, and held in an adult jail wearing a jumpsuit they had to roll up 4 times just to fit him. So here is the question this case never fully answered. If the evidence was this thin from the start, how did it ever get that far? And if an 11-year-old didn't do it, who did? Hi, welcome to my channel. Here we investigate cases where danger never looked like danger, where the person who can hurt you might be the same person sitting with you at the family table. If you value human voiceover, detailed research, and the details that truly matter, make sure you subscribe. I won't waste your time with a long intro. Let's get straight to the case.
ANUBIS.
On February 20th, 2009, the small community of Wampam, Pennsylvania, was shaken to its core in a way that no one there would ever forget. A local resident, just 26 years old and fully pregnant, a woman named Kenzie Hauk, was found dead after sustaining a fatal gunshot wound. The questions that followed were devastating. Who would want to harm this expectant mother? Who would want to take the life of her unborn child? At the time of her death, Kenzie was already a mother to 2 daughters and was weeks away from welcoming her baby boy into the world. Her older daughter, Janessa, was 7. Her younger daughter, Adeline, was just 4. Kenzie worked as a hairstylist and was also a devoted stay-at-home mom. Motherhood was not something she had stumbled into. It was something she had wanted with her whole heart. She had come through a dark chapter, having escaped a previously abusive relationship, and now found herself in something that felt like a genuine fresh start. She was engaged to the father of her unborn son, a man named Chris. Chris had a son of his own from a prior relationship, a boy named Jordan, who was 11 years old at the time. And Jordan and Chris were the kind of father-son pair people hold up as an example. Jordan was a 5th grader, a baseball player, and the quarterback of a football team his own father coached. The 2 of them hunted together, spent nearly all of their spare time together, and by all accounts were genuinely inseparable. To really understand this story, you have to understand the town. Wampam had just over 600 residents, 600 people. This was a place where you did not just recognize your neighbors. You knew their kids, their cars, their habits, their histories. Kenzie and Chris had both grown up there, side by side, from a very young age. They reconnected as adults, the connection was immediate, and they began dating in May of 2008. Things moved quickly, and in the best possible way. They moved in together, blended their families, and it seemed to happen almost effortlessly. Blending families with children from different backgrounds can be a fragile and complicated process. It requires patience, time, and a lot of goodwill from everyone involved. But in this case, it appeared to unfold naturally, almost without friction. Jordan took to Kenzie in a way that surprised even people who were close to them. He started calling her mom. When he found out that a little brother was on the way, the little brother he had always wanted, he was absolutely thrilled. He had been counting down to that arrival. That perfect small-town story was shattered on a cold February morning. That morning, Chris had been running late for work. Kenzie had asked him to stay home. She hadn't been feeling well and was close to her due date. But bills are bills, and he had to go in. Janessa and Jordan woke up and began getting ready for school. At some point during that routine, Jordan headed downstairs to grab some clothing. He was in the middle of switching rooms because the new baby was taking over his old room. a small but telling reminder of how close this family was to a brand new beginning. At approximately 8:15 that morning, the school bus arrived and picked up the two older children. 4-year-old Adeline was still asleep upstairs when they left. Kenzie and Chris had arranged for tree trimmers to come that day to clear some trees on the property. The crew arrived around 9 o'clock. What they found when they pulled up was not what anyone would expect. Little Adeline, just 4 years old, was standing in the front doorway, sobbing. She told the workers something was seriously wrong. The tree trimmers called 911 right away. When officers and paramedics arrived, their initial assessment was that Kenzie had experienced a serious pregnancy-related medical emergency. They believed she had hemorrhaged. The scene was treated accordingly. No one thought to secure it. They moved through the house freely, touching doorknobs, walking hallways, contaminating surfaces. It was not until the coroner arrived and began to examine her that everything changed. As he moved her, he stopped. And police on scene recalled him saying 4 words that no one in that room was prepared to hear. "We have a problem." That was the moment the fatal gunshot wound was discovered. In an instant, everything shifted. But here is where things became deeply troubling from an investigative standpoint. By the time that discovery was made, the scene had already been compromised. Doorknobs had been touched. Pathways had been walked repeatedly. Surfaces that could have held fingerprints, DNA evidence, or gunshot residue had all been contaminated before anyone realized what they were looking at. An irreversible mistake made in the first critical minutes of what was, in fact, a homicide investigation. Searching the house, investigators found multiple firearms. That alone was not especially alarming. Chris and Jordan were known hunters, but when they searched the outside of the property, they found 3 20-gauge shell casings. That detail mattered, because Jordan owned a 20-gauge shotgun. He had received it as a Christmas gift just 2 months before Kenzie's death. One of those casings stood out, found in pristine condition, resting along a fence beneath a stack of frozen leaves. The shelter had protected it from the elements, but it raised serious questions about how it had gotten there and when. Even so, investigators were not able to identify a confirmed murder weapon, and to this day, no murder weapon has been officially confirmed. Police contacted Chris and had him return home right away, then brought him in for a formal interview and tested his hands for gunshot residue. The results came back negative. He had a confirmed alibi from his time at work. Chris was fairly quickly ruled out as a suspect. Investigators then turned their attention to the children. Officers went to Jordan and Janessa's school to speak with them directly. And here is something that would later prove enormously significant. Those interviews were not recorded, not a single one of them. Hold on to that detail because it is going to matter a great deal. When Janessa was asked about that morning, she said she didn't recall anything unusual. She remembered Kenzie calling out to them to hurry or they'd missed the bus. Then they ran out the door. Jordan's account was largely the same, with one notable addition. As they were heading out, he said he noticed a black truck parked near the edge of the driveway. He had not thought much of it. He assumed it belonged to the tree trimmers. That black truck, quietly sitting at the edge of a driveway on a cold February morning, would become one of the most important threads in this entire case. The bus driver's account was straightforward and never changed through all of the interviews. He said he saw 2 of the kids racing down the driveway, just like they did every single morning. Nothing about that day looked different to him. That detail rings true to anyone who has ever been a child running late for the bus. 9 times out of 10, you are not calmly walking. You are sprinting with everything you have. That was apparently the routine in that household. Jordan won the foot race, as he usually did. They climbed on the bus and headed to school like any other day. After the initial interviews, Janessa and Adeline went to stay at one of Kenzie's family members' homes. Meanwhile, police conducted more rounds of interviews with both children. And here is the detail that becomes impossible to ignore. There were so many interviews that it was not until the 4th one that anyone thought to hit record. 3 prior interviews, conversations that could have contained critical information, and not one of them was documented. The 4th interview was the only one that was, and it was during that 4th recorded interview that something significant shifted. Janessa's story changed. For the first time, she mentioned that she remembered Jordan moving his guns around that morning. She said that while she waited downstairs, she heard a loud, heavy thud from upstairs. At the time, she said she had not thought much of it. Now, here is what makes that so significant. Janessa had spent time at Kenzie's family's home before this interview took place. And it was only after that, in her fourth interview, that this new information surfaced. How does a loud thud from directly above your head not come to mind immediately? How does something like that fail to appear in 3 separate conversations with investigators? Whether grief and shock suppress the memory is possible. People process trauma in ways that are not always predictable. But the timing of that revelation and the company Janessa had been keeping before it appeared was very difficult to set aside. At the same time, Jordan was also providing new information. He began talking more about the black truck near the home. And now, for the first time, he said he remembered seeing someone behind the wheel. A man in a trucker hut. A significant addition to a detail he had mentioned before, without ever describing a driver. The stories on both sides were shifting, and the picture was becoming more complicated. The mention of that black truck opened a door to a very different possibility. And this is where Adam Harvey entered the story. Adam had been Kenzie's ex-boyfriend for approximately 6 years. He drove a black truck, and by every account from those who knew Kenzie, she was genuinely terrified of him. Not vaguely, not generally, the fear was documented. Kenzie and her family had filed formal orders of protection against Adam more than once based on more than one incident. In one filing, Kenzie described his behavior in her own words. She wrote that Adam had called her mother's phone and threatened to take her whole family out when he came to town. She stated clearly that she was afraid he would hurt her physically, that he had a drinking problem that was out of control, and that he had threatened on more than one occasion to hire someone to cause her harm. A separate filing described another incident. Kenzie and Adam had argued, and when she attempted to leave in her car, he took her keys and left a visible bruise on her forearm. His brother then showed up and also threatened her. They only left when police arrived, and things had recently escalated. The tension between Kenzie and Adam had reached a new level over money and child support. Kenzie had named Adam as the father of her daughter Adeline. A paternity test was conducted. Just 1 week before Kenzie's death, the results came back. Adam was not the father. That revelation appeared to send him into a rage. He began calling Kenzie and her family repeatedly, leaving threatening messages, relentless in his anger. And then, the night before Kenzie was found fatally injured, Adam came face to face with Kenzie's family at a local restaurant. He had gone in to pick up food. What followed was a loud and aggressive confrontation. Voices were raised. The situation became combative. Adam had to be physically restrained before being removed from the restaurant. Less than 12 hours later, Kenzie was dead. Is that a coincidence? You have a documented history of threatening behavior spanning years and multiple formal legal filings. You have a man with a fresh, specific, and furious motive, someone who had just learned he was not the biological father of a child he had believed was his for 4 years. You have a black truck seen near the home that morning. You have a violent, physical confrontation with the victim's family the night before she died. And on the other side of the scale, you have an 11-year-old boy who had no apparent motive, who called Kenzie his mother, and who by every account had been eagerly anticipating his baby brother's arrival. The question of who was responsible for what happened to Kenzie was anything but settled. And the investigators' answer to that question was about to be one that very few people who followed this case closely were prepared to accept. The morning of the murder, police stopped Adam and began questioning him. And one of their biggest reasons for clearing him was the snow on his truck. Investigators argued that they didn't believe Adam could have made the 24-mile drive while his vehicle still carried snow from its point of origin. That line of reasoning deserves scrutiny. Anyone who has driven after a snowstorm, particularly through mountain terrain, knows that snow can cling to a vehicle for a surprisingly long time. Without knowing the exact weather conditions that morning, it still seems like a significant stretch to fully clear someone based primarily on snow accumulation. During the interview, Adam also claimed he did not know where Kenzie had been living after she moved in with Chris. That claim is very hard to accept. This was a town of 600 people. This was a man who had been calling Kenzie constantly, threatening her family, running into them at the local restaurant, and maintaining a visible presence in their lives for years. The idea that he did not know where she lived is, at best, difficult to believe. Police tested Adam's hands for gunshot residue. The results came back clean. He told investigators he had been at his father's house until approximately 9 o'clock that morning, and his father confirmed the alibi. Adam also agreed to take a polygraph test. Following that, he was cleared from the investigation entirely. And then at 3:30 in the morning, just 18 hours after Kenzie's death, Chris and Jordan were startled awake by a loud, heavy banging at the front door at Chris's parents' house. The two of them had only just fallen asleep. Jordan had fallen asleep, crying in Chris's arms. An 11-year-old boy, grieving the woman he already called mom, finally at rest after the most devastating day of his young life. It was the police. And they were not there with news or an update. They were there to arrest Jordan, 11 years old. Jordan was being charged as an adult with first-degree premeditated murder, the murder of Kenzie and of his unborn baby brother. The evidence police used to support that arrest centered primarily on the change in Janessa's story from her fourth recorded interview. There was also a blanket found with gunshot residue on it and a hole through the fabric. The most straightforward explanation for that blanket, though never specifically confirmed, is that it was used to muffle the sound of a shot. Prosecutors, however, argued that the blanket was used to conceal the weapon as Jordan carried it downstairs. Later, the prosecution claimed that Jordan's coat and jeans each contained one single particle of gunshot residue, and that his gun smelled as though it had recently been fired. But here is the critical context. Jordan had gone on a turkey hunt less than a week before Kenzie was killed. He wore that same coat. He wore those same jeans. He fired that same 20-gauge shotgun, his brand new Christmas gift. The idea that trace residue from a hunting trip 1 week earlier could remain on a coat is not only possible, it seems entirely plausible. And what makes this even more striking is that there were no fingerprints found on Jordan's gun, and police never tested his hands for gunshot residue at the time of his arrest. The prosecution's case rested primarily on Janessa's revised account and one single particle of gunshot residue found on Jordan's clothing. But if Jordan had fired that weapon on the morning Kenzie was killed, would there not be far more residue present? And there was still the question of motive. According to police, Jordan's reason for harming the woman he called mom was that he was jealous of the new baby and upset about being asked to switch bedrooms. That was the motive. Room reassignments and sibling jealousy. And then there was the timeline. According to the police's own theory, Jordan and Janessa walked out of the house together. Then Jordan ran back inside. He ran up the stairs. He grabbed his gun. He came back downstairs. He retrieved the ammunition. He fired the weapon. He then cleaned the gun, removing any residue, any biological trace, leaving no fingerprints anywhere on the weapon. Then he ran the gun back upstairs, put it away, came back downstairs, made it out through the front door, reached the top of the driveway, and raced Janessa to the bus, which is precisely what the bus driver reported seeing. The police say that entire sequence of events unfolded in 120 seconds, 2 minutes. Think about what that requires us to accept. An 11-year-old child carrying out a plan this calculated, leaving almost no trace evidence, no blood, no meaningful residue, and executing it completely in 120 seconds. And then that same child going to school and spending the remainder of the day behaving so completely normally that not a single teacher, classmate, or adult noticed anything out of the ordinary. That is an extraordinary claim. It demands extraordinary evidence, which does not appear to be present here. Because of Pennsylvania law, Jordan was required to be charged as an adult. That charge carried the potential for a life sentence. He was held separately in the jail because the facility did not have the space or infrastructure to properly accommodate a child of his age. They did not even have jumpsuits small enough to fit him. His had to be rolled up multiple times just to stay on his body. His attorney argued he should be transferred to a juvenile facility. The judge refused. An 11-year-old boy, charged as an adult, held in an adult jail, wearing clothes that had to be folded over several times to fit. And the answer from the bench was no. The reasoning was that since Jordan was not cooperating with the prosecution by providing a confession, he could not be placed in a juvenile rehabilitation center. Read that again slowly. They were saying that because Jordan refused to confess because he maintained his innocence, he deserved harsher conditions. His Fifth Amendment right, the constitutional right to not incriminate himself, was being used against him as a justification for keeping him in an adult facility. A system designed to protect the innocent was treating an innocent plea as evidence of guilt. Finally, on February 24th, Jordan was moved to a juvenile center, then transferred again to a facility over 230 miles from home. You might expect that kind of distance to break a family's resolve. Chris was not that kind of man. Chris drove those 230 miles every single day to see his son, every day. 4 hours in the car, each way, just to make sure Jordan knew he was loved and not alone. It destroyed their finances. He lost his job. Whatever money remained went to gas, to groceries, to keeping those visits possible. Chris gave everything he had, and throughout all of it, he remained completely and unwaveringly convinced that Jordan had absolutely nothing to do with Kenzie's death. That conviction never wavered, not once, through all of it. There is something Chris said that any parent who has ever known their child deeply will understand. He said that when he looked at Jordan and asked him directly whether he had anything to do with this, and watched his face, his eyes, his reactions, he knew. Not because he wanted to believe his child, because he knew his child. You study your children from the moment they arrive. You know every tell, every expression, every way they carry themselves, when they are hiding something and when they are not. And Chris said that everything Jordan showed him told him the same thing. His son was not lying. He also made one other point that is worth sitting with. Jordan was still 11 years old. He still believed in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. That is not the profile of a child who executes a precise, calculated act of violence and then maintains a perfect cover story for years. That is a child.
Today, T-shirts in support of the boy Jordan Brown, an answer back to the T-shirts worn by family and friends of shotgun victim Kenzie Houck, who prosecutors say Brown killed when he was 11 and she was nearly 9 months pregnant.
We're just here to support Jordan because we know he's innocent, we believe in him, and we'd like to get through this stage so that they can find the real killer and actually give some justice to baby Christopher and Kenzie.
The victims' mom and dad, Deb and Jack Houck, are troubled by what they see inside and outside the courtroom.
There's absolutely no emotion on their side. I don't know. You must not have a heart. I don't know.
It's upsetting. It's hard. It's just hard. I understand it's a tragedy that what happened, but I really don't honestly believe my nephew did this. So, I mean, we're all going to fight for him and hope that he comes walking out this courtroom today.
For years, he's maintained his silence about the accusations against his son. But today, here at Lawrence County Court, Jordan Brown's father finally spoke out, and he had plenty to say.
Jordan loved Kenzie, still does, and he misses her.
With a judge deciding tomorrow whether his son will go free, Chris Brown told reporters 14-year-old Jordan did not kill Chris's pregnant fiancée, Kenzie Houck, in February 2009.
I hope that justice is served, Jordan is released, and at this point, you can never give back what's been taken from him. But we can move from this day forward and try to make his life as best as possible.
But Kenzie Houck's father has a different idea about justice being served. He's hoping the judge finds Jordan responsible for her death, but says he's worried because of what he says were lies told on the witness stand.
When you're in there, hearing lies, it's horrible. You know, when somebody gets up there and swears not to lie on the stand, and then they're lying, it's horrible to hear.
Houck refused to elaborate, but we know that only 3 witnesses testified for the defense. One of them was Chris Brown.
My testimony was as honest as could be, but he is correct. There was a lot of lying on that stand.
For the second straight day, the Brown and Houck families exchanged harsh words outside the courtroom, prompting a warning from sheriff's deputies.
You know, I feel bad, genuinely feel bad for the Houck family that they have been convinced by this team of investigators who conducted an inadequate investigation that Jordan did this.
One of the most fiercely contested elements of the trial was the alleged murder weapon. And the word alleged matters here, because there was no eyewitness account, no biological trace, nothing belonging to Kenzie found on that gun to confirm it had been used in the crime. The investigators involved were not trained firearms professionals. They had no specialized expertise in determining how long ago a weapon had been discharged based on scent alone. Could that smell have come from days earlier from a hunting trip the week before? Could the shell casings on the property have been left behind at any point? There was far too much reasonable doubt here. The kind of reasonable doubt that a just system is supposed to take seriously. The trial lasted 3 days. On April 13th, 2012, Jordan was found delinquent, which in juvenile court is the equivalent of a guilty verdict, and was sentenced to remain in custody until his 21st birthday. However, on June 13th, 2016, 2 months before his 18th birthday, Jordan was released on probation into the custody of his uncle in Ohio. It had been over 7 years since Kenzie's murder. During those years, Jordan had not given up on himself. He taught himself to play guitar. He taught himself basketball. He maintained a grade point average of 3.9. He graduated from high school 3 days before his release. And upon walking free, he immediately enrolled in college to study computer science. This was a young man who, despite everything that had been taken from him, refused to stop moving forward. Then came July 18th, 2018. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned Jordan's conviction in a unanimous decision 5-0. Every single justice agreed. They concluded there had been insufficient evidence against Jordan and that the trial should never have taken place to begin with. Jordan was completely exonerated from a crime he had been convicted of 7 years earlier, and because of that exoneration, double jeopardy now applies. He can never be charged with this crime again. Whatever the truth of what happened in that house on February 20th, 2009, the legal system had formally declared that Jordan Brown was not the answer to that question.
At the first press conference since his conviction was unanimously overturned by the state Supreme Court, his lawyers told him not to answer questions, but Jordan Brown made a slight correction about his college major.
He'll be a sophomore here, starting back up the end of August, beginning of September, and information, not technology, information business systems. He spoke.
But that was it from Brown. He let his lawyers, Daniel Alisco and Stephen Colafella, and his father, Chris, do all the talking.
We believe that there was a rush to judgment, and we also believe that he was the casualty of a system that broke down.
The 11-year-old was charged with killing his father's fiancée and her unborn child based on evidence that the Supreme Court called insufficient as a matter of law to overcome the child's presumption of innocence.
It's been a long road. As far as getting news of the exoneration, it was kind of bittersweet, so to speak. Overwhelmed with joy, but still full of sorrow, knowing that, we really won't have closure.
That's because the killer of Chris Brown's fiancée is still out there.
There are people involved in this case that are sworn to investigate. I would just hope that they would do that. I would hope they would reopen the case and pursue the actual murderer, who, by the way, has been walking the streets for 9 years.
State police did the original investigation, but no word yet on whether the cold case will be reopened. As for Jordan's future,
there's no doubt in my mind he's going to be a productive member of society. He's going to do great things. He's got good things coming.
Kenzie's 2 daughters continue to live with her parents, their grandparents, who are raising them with love and devotion. But Kenzie's family remains adamant. They believe firmly and without wavering that no one else could have done this to Kenzie but Jordan. That he was driven by jealousy, jealous of the new baby, angry about the bedroom switch, and they firmly believe he should still be behind bars today. In 2020, Jordan filed a civil lawsuit against the former Pennsylvania State Police Commissioner and the 4 troopers who had investigated the crime and placed him under arrest. The civil affidavits filed in connection with that lawsuit are, by all accounts, absolutely striking, and what they alleged about the way this investigation was conducted paints a picture that is very difficult to look at and call justice. Jordan's civil attorney alleged that investigators failed to follow established departmental protocols when they interviewed Kenzie's daughters. Department policy required that the very first interview be recorded. It required that multiple adults not cycle in and out of the room during questioning. It required that case details not be discussed in front of the children. And in situations where more than one interview was necessary, policy was clear. The first interview was to be treated as the most reliable account. Those rules existed for a reason. They were designed specifically to protect the integrity of a child witness's account from outside influence. According to the lawsuit, they were not followed. Not even close. Janessa was interviewed 4 times. Only the 4th interview, the very last one, was ever recorded. And here is why that matters so much. If investigators had relied on that first account, the one documented only in unrecorded conversation, with no way to verify or review it, there would not have been a single red flag raised. There was nothing in that first account that pointed toward Jordan at all. In that first interview, Janessa gave a completely ordinary account. She said they were getting ready for school that morning, just like any other morning. She and Jordan left the house together, ran down the driveway, got on the bus, and headed off to school. That was her story. That was what she said before anything else could shape or influence her memory. Janessa only began talking about a mysterious boom from upstairs after she had spent time with her grandparents. That detail did not appear in her original account. It surfaced later, and that is not a minor inconsistency. That is the kind of shift that raises very serious questions about how a child's memory can be shaped by the environment and the people around them.
Jordan Brown made national news as an 11-year-old killer. Now his attorneys say it never happened and claim the Pennsylvania State Police robbed him of his youth.
You're a kid. They took that from Jordan. And when they took it from him at 3 a.m. in the middle of the night with flashlights pointed in his face for a crime he did not commit, the first place that they put him was in a solitary confinement in an adult facility.
The attorneys say police fabricated evidence and hid evidence that would have exonerated Brown.
Absolutely no evidence, direct or circumstantial, that indicating that Jordan Brown committed this crime. There's not a single piece of physical evidence. There was no DNA. There were no fingerprints. There was nothing.
Instead, they relied on the statement of a 7-year-old girl who changed her story.
She was interviewed 4 times against protocol on the day that her mother was found dead. And most specifically, none of them were recorded except for the 4th of those interviews, which occurred after midnight.
The lawsuit also alleged that investigators failed to properly look into Adam Harvey, and the details surrounding Adam were not easy to dismiss. A man who had threatened Kenzie on multiple documented occasions. A man who had been in contact with Kenzie's family just 12 hours before the murder. A man who had recently learned in a rage that he was not the biological father of a child he had believed was his. The kind of revelation that a thorough investigation would want to examine very carefully. The attorney went further. The lawsuit alleged that state police investigators failed to include exculpatory evidence in their affidavit evidence that pointed toward the possibility that someone other than Jordan was responsible for these deaths. According to the lawsuit, that evidence existed. It simply was never included in the charging documents. And then there was the matter of a specific interview transcript. The lawsuit provided a full transcript of a conversation investigators had with a former girlfriend of Chris. In that interview, this woman stated clearly more than once that she had never been afraid of Jordan. That is what she said. But the official summary prepared by the troopers characterized her words in a completely different way, claiming that she had said she was scared of Jordan and didn't want her interview used against him. The opposite of what she had actually told them. And this was not an isolated error. It was one of over half a dozen mischaracterizations found in the summary of that single transcript. That goes beyond a clerical mistake. That is a pattern. Jordan also sought financial restitution for the thousands of dollars his father had spent on travel, driving 230 miles every single day. He had since been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder as a direct result of what the criminal case had put him through. The troopers who worked the original investigation stood firmly by their conclusions. A retired investigator who had worked the case spoke without a trace of doubt. He said that investigation was carried out by some of the finest police officers in the country. He acknowledged that none of them had wanted to put handcuffs on an 11-year-old, but he insisted that was where the evidence had taken them. "I have never looked back that we arrested the wrong person," he said. "There is not a trooper on scene that day that has lost 1 second of sleep over this case." Those are strong words from a man standing behind an investigation that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court unanimously said should never have gone to trial, and yet nobody else has ever been charged. Nobody else is currently behind bars for the killing of Kenzie or her unborn child. That fact remains, sitting quietly at the center of everything. Kenzie Houck deserved a real investigation, one that preserved the scene, recorded the interviews, and followed every credible lead before reaching for the most convenient answer. Her daughters deserved the truth. And Jordan, whatever you believe about him, deserved a process that followed its own rules. None of them got that. The scene was contaminated before anyone called it a crime. Interviews went unrecorded. A child was handcuffed before the evidence was solid. And the one man with a documented history of threatening Kenzie, who sat across from her family the night before she died, walked away cleared on the basis of snow on his truck and his own father's word. Do you believe Jordan killed Kenzie? Do you think sibling jealousy and a bedroom reassignment drove an 11-year-old to carry out a near-perfect act of violence in 2 minutes, then go to school and behave completely normally for the rest of the day without a single adult noticing anything out of the ordinary? Or do you think the investigation pointed at the wrong person from the very beginning, and that the person with a documented history of threats, a furious fresh motive, a black truck seen near the home that morning, and a violent confrontation with Kenzie's family the night before she died was never looked at nearly hard enough? The concrete, provable truth of what happened to Kenzie is something we still do not have. Her killer, whoever that person is, has never been convicted. Let me know what you think in the comments. If there is other information you have heard about this case, share it, because people are deeply divided on what they believe happened, and this conversation is far from over. Subscribe if you want to keep asking questions like these, the ones that don't have clean answers and the ones that the headlines never quite got right. Next time, we are looking at another case where the person closest to the victim became the center of an investigation that never quite held together,